Thanks a lot, David. So everybody, anyways, quick question. What's the one thing that every hotel website starts with when you go there? If you think you want to go someplace, what does it all start with? What's that? Login. Okay. Well, let's say you're just going in as a guest. What else does it have? Where do you want to go, right? Okay, there you go. Where do you want to go? And that's something that I always found somehow frustrating, just individually, personally. It's like, I don't know where I want to go, especially when I'm planning a vacation, right? And we were thinking about that problem for a long time, honestly. And then with the advent of generative AI, it was like, aha, someone has finally found the key that unlocks this door. Let's see what consumers actually think about that key and whether or not they're ready for that door to be unlocked. And so that was the genesis of a research program that we started a little over a year ago. And we then continued it this spring. We did kind of a refresh on it. And so I want to share with you today the findings of just how ready are consumers for that door to be unlocked. That's kind of the essence of this conversation. So, and not only that, but also, well, what's at play for the hospitality industry? What if hoteliers are caught flat-footed by this thing and others steal the march on them? So, skip over that. Our lawyers, what are you going to do? They're there. They got to have a job, right? So hospitality companies are, to be honest, behind the curve in building the kinds of tools that really leverage the technology that we just heard about. But they have a lot of assets that actually could maybe put them ahead of the curve, right? So if you look at the tech companies and the OTAs, they've got sophisticated tools that are providing pretty high quality travel recommendations. I don't know how many of you have played around with Google Bard or Expedia's ChatGPT plugin, but these things are pretty impressive and definitely give advice, at least for me, by my lights, that don't seem too, filled with hallucinations. It's like, no, that's actually pretty darn good advice. So, and hospitality companies are generally playing around the fringes, right? You've got, some folks, Marriott doing some stuff with their homes and villas. IHG's got some in development Gen AI travel planners. But they're not nearly to the level that the Googles and the Expedias and the Bookings are. So on the other hand, they do have some assets that are really interesting, right? They have a lot of guest and loyalty member data that's at their disposal, which could differentiate what they do. They also know the local markets probably better than anyone else, and they have a lot of property-specific insights, right? They know something more about the amenities of a property than may be discoverable through general searches online. So there's an upside potential here, and there's a possibility that they could achieve a higher booking share for their product, higher direct booking share, and therefore lower costs, and also, importantly, it's important for almost every travel company these days to increase the ancillary revenues that they generate for people coming to their property. So there's a lot of potential here, but they're starting behind the curve. So what we did is we talked to just over 2,000 people in North America. I'll admit this is a bit of a North American-centric survey. Although we had disproportionate participation from our friends up north in Canada, for some reason we got a pretty good chunk of Canadians to respond. And the kind of distribution by household income and age is shown there. I won't bore you with those details. The other thing that was interesting is we had a good level of participation across the three major categories we were looking at: airline, hotel, and cruise lines. Those were the ones we focused on because we felt like that's the place where people might be looking for the most vacation inspiration type of support. And also pretty good participation from loyalty members across the spectrum here. So, obviously, probably fewer people in cruise loyalty programs to begin with, right? So that was our population. And what did we find out? Well, we found out that guests had, or hotel guests and travelers, actually a fair number had already used generative AI tools in planning a vacation activity. 39% had used it for inspiring and itinerary planning. And amongst those that had done so, they were by and large very satisfied with the quality of the recommendations, and most of them had, and I shouldn't say most, but a large chunk of them had booked more than half of what they had recommended to them. So that's pretty impressive considering the relative youth of these tools. The other thing that was really interesting was how much embrace there was for the future in terms of how they would use these tools. So most of them said that they would definitely use this for future travel inspiration. Again, the reference here was always to vacation planning. And they would similarly use it for planning the details of the itinerary, and probably a good chunk of them said they would, not quite half, but a good chunk of them said they would actually select the booking channel because it had Gen AI capabilities. So that's interesting, right? That's like, okay, that's actually an important mechanism to steer channel selection. So where are they looking for the support? You know, it's largely at the top of the funnel, right? That's really the exciting part of this, is you now have a chance to capture the guests before they can actually type in where do you want to go, right? And that's the exciting part. So they would like to get that inspiration from Gen AI. A lot of folks would also like to have it help out, plan out the itineraries once they've kind of homed in on where they want to go and the activities they want to participate in. And then, as we said, a lot of them actually might even choose to book through that same channel that gave them all that help, right? So that's an important thing. So why is that important? Why is it important financially? It's because of this picture right here. If we look at how we've grown in terms of online booking share that's direct, so the share of online bookings that come to the hotel company directly, hotels have fought long and hard over the last 20 some odd years, 30 years, I guess, probably by now, to get to that 51%, all right? That's where we were in 2023. And if we don't see Gen AI investment happening on the part of hotel companies, well, what's going to happen is basically that share is going to start to erode, okay? Because the OTAs, the metas, have stolen the march on the hotelier. And so that risks declining considerably over the next 5 years as guests actually book away from direct channels, not because they don't like what direct channels have to offer, but because it just doesn't capture their imagination early enough. Again, this is early at the top of the funnel. Now, if we make some investments, but are generally outstripped by the OTAs and the metas, we're going to still lose share, but not as much. But if we really leverage what we have, the assets that we had, the guest insight, the property knowledge, the local market knowledge, we could actually turn this thing that could work against us into something that works for us. And that's really the green line here that says, hey, we could actually move share away from indirect channels even further and actually boost our direct share. And that could mean a savings of almost $500 million in commissions in this market. So that's sort of the why do we care from a CFO and board level standpoint. That's a big thing. But the other thing that we care about is these loyalty members. I'll be honest with you, when we started this work, we said, the people who are really going to find this exciting are the people who aren't the super savvy travelers. The savvy travelers, they already know what they're doing. They know what's out there. They've talked to their friends. They've chatted with the person next to them on the airplane or whatever and heard about their last great trip to some exotic locale. But the people who don't know, they're not sure where they want to go. Well, guess what? We were wrong, okay? It turns out that those most frequent travelers, the folks at the upper end of the loyalty status spectrum, are actually more intrigued by this than the folks at the bottom. And we thought about it a little while, and we actually said, you know what, it actually does stand to reason, because it's the folks at the upper end that actually have the discretion to be inspired, right? If you're, taking your, once annual pilgrimage to Gulf Shores, Alabama, you may not need to be inspired about where you want to stay in that trip because you you've been there before. You know where you're going, and that's the same trip you make. Or if you're, going once again to see grandma and grandpa down in Florida, you may not need inspiration for, how are you going to get there, what you're going to do when you're there. You kind of already know that trip. But if you're, the person who's, kind of been there, done that with the Caribbean, where else could I go that's still warm and has great scuba or snorkel, that's the kind of person that we really think might be motivated to use this. And this is especially of concern to hotel companies who have really come to rely on the fact that their most loyal customers are the ones that are in love with their websites or in love with their app and are going to be booking preferentially through that. So this is another sign of the risk if we don't get ahead of this and start to make these investments. So, bottom line here is that there are significant advantages and benefits from Gen AI for hotel brands, owners, and guests alike. Okay, we can protect against losing guests at the top of the funnel to those indirect channels. We can make sure we have competitive brand value proposition for hotel owners because they're also going to have more folks booking direct for them. And we can, really enhance guest visibility and capture rates for all the things that we offer on the property that go above and beyond the room alone. So that's an exciting thing. But to get there, we're going to really have to leverage those assets that we really can control, right? So our loyalty member data, our local market knowledge, our property's specific insights, and also the information we have, loyalty program member or not, about guests' prior stays. If I know that, when you go on a vacation, you often want to have, you make use of the spa facilities in the resort that you're booking. If I know that about you, well, that's something that Google Bard's not going to know, or at least not yet. So that's something we should take advantage of, right? We should be using that information, welding it to the other stuff that we know, or welding it to, broad destination content that might be accessible to us, and that's something that we should be able to do. But we've got to really focus on the use cases where this stuff adds value. We're not going to, I wouldn't expect this is going to be, entirely exciting and useful for the business person who's going, for their monthly trip from Cleveland to Chicago, right? That's not the use case here. But let's figure out what those use cases are. Where do the personalized hotel suggestions come into the most play? Can we give comparative pricing? And give insights in terms of how we could use loyalty currencies and things like that leverage this stuff. If you sort of said, I want to be inspired for my travel, but my radius of travel is controlled by the amount of loyalty currency I have in my program. Can you help me plan that? That's the kind of thing that could be useful. And then also leveraging the fact that you could communicate, stuff in advance to the property and special requests that may be something that, is not going to happen as readily through other channels. These are the things that give you the extra stickiness that you really want for those direct channels. So, where are these things? There's a lot of places that these use cases come to play, but if we just take a couple here where hotel can actually be really advantaged, right? So generate tailored suggestions to enhance the in-stay experience, right? You want to have a spa treatment, you want to have the high floor, you want to have particular attributes of the room that you're booking. I know that about you, and probably nobody else does, right? Or, using, after the booking has been made, maybe the guest is even on property, using Gen AI in a chatbot type of mode or through the app to kind of serve as a virtual concierge to recommend on and off property offerings. It says on property, but it could really also be off property offerings and amenities and activities and things like that. So these are places where those of you in the room that are hoteliers, you have an advantage, and the OTAs and the tech companies can't beat you at that stuff, at least not yet. So that's the entirety of the presentation, but would love to take any questions you guys have, tell you a little bit more about the survey or the findings, or just talk about broadly the trends in the industry on this stuff. questions, comments? Yeah, yes, sir.
So when you talked about inspiration, is that okay? Okay, I'll be brief, I promise. When you talked about inspiration, and then the slide before that, when you talked about hotel focus, right? You mentioned that it is absolutely, it is useful or important to have unique guest information or data sets in order to elevate personalization. Can you speak to the data privacy concerns that might surround that specific, let's say, type of implementation?
Yeah, no, it's a fair question. Obviously, we would always respect people's right to opt out of that kind of a thing, and I think that's pretty straightforward. Sort of the right to be forgotten if you wish to be forgotten, that kind of a concept. So, I think it's something that people should be explicitly aware of is happening, and if they don't want it to happen, they should be able to opt out. That's I think the key. I think our hope would be that something that gets printed out on the guest folio as something you spent money on, like a spa treatment or a group exercise class or a golf outing or whatever that was part of your hotel stay would be fair game. But if somebody said, no, I don't want that to be used in making recommendations to me, that should be their prerogative, and they should be able to decline giving permission for that usage. Yeah, Beju.
So one question is on the technology companies, right? You talked about OTAs and hoteliers, but do technology companies like Google and others, do they have a role to play here? Like we had Google Flights, right, which was pretty good in the product search. Similarly here.
Yeah, I mean they still could, right? You could, look, Expedia used ChatGPT as a plugin, right? Could you as a hotelier do the same thing? Yeah, I think you could, right? There are other companies here that have specialized in building and extensive geographic, insights in terms of location information and things like that, points of interest and so on. And they have, offerings where they have, kind of created white label products that put a natural language front end on that so people can search. I think that's what Moby does from what I understand, Moby.ai. So those are things that I think technology companies can be a part of it. It's not like they all are sort of evilly plotting to control all of this. It's just that if we don't as an industry act on it, they'll just accidentally own it all. They're not like necessarily trying to evilly in some way. It's just they will because they're moving ahead and they're not waiting for us. They're moving ahead at the pace the consumer wants to go. There's a question over here, folks. Not to, if there was another, I apologize, but sure. I just saw this gentleman raise his hand.
Sure. I'm a hotel owner, and with respect, I think you're making, in your study, I haven't read the study, but I'm assuming you've made the same fundamental mistake that tech vendors make, which is they think about hotel owners who have a special place in all of this because they're the ones at the end of the day write the check and say, we put the foot to the pedal or we're not going to play this game. And you talk about the hotel owners as sort of like this amorphous mass that all behave the same way. We don't. There's a vast difference between the early adopters and the laggards who in 5 years' time will still be saying, what does AI mean? Now, in terms of our company, we've already deployed front-end bots, and they've shifted over 10 to 15% off the OTAs, right?
Yeah.
Worth millions and millions of dollars. Now, if you translate that, if every other hotelier was doing that in the world, we'd be taking billions of dollars out of Google, Expedia. So the real question is, why don't we do it? It's not like it's expensive technology. It's not complicated technology. Any 25-year-old kid can put it on your hotel's website for you. That's, for me, the real challenge and frustration is that we still, as hotel owners, allow our industry to be plundered by third-party distributors, when now the technology is there to really turn the tide. And it's there now.
Yeah, I agree, and that's kind of, not only is it there now, because there's a lot of things that are here now, but the consumer isn't ready for, right? But this is here now, and the consumer's ready.
The consumer's very ready.
Yeah.
We put our bots up which help people identify all sorts of things, which room, which cocktail, which food, which tours, et cetera, et cetera. They started using it immediately. And immediately we went into the thousands of inquiries being answered by our bots. Now, we weren't getting thousands of inquiries in our call center, so this is a whole lot of additional inquiries. And I put it down to a very simple thing. You know, if you ring a human, you do have, if you're a decent person, you have some sense of not wanting to bother them. We don't care about computers.
Right.
We can ask computers 10,000 questions, the same question 10 different ways. So what we've seen is huge increase, and that increase is translated into bookings.
I don't doubt it, and I think a lot of companies that have the wherewithal to make the investments probably are doing so. I know several of them are doing so behind the scenes, but in terms of what's fielded by the big brands, and let's face it, you may be privileged to be able to make these kinds of investments. The average owner of a beachside Holiday Inn does not necessarily have that kind of resource to invest in it, and they're waiting for the brand to do it for them on their behalf. And so, again, I'm not criticizing IHG or anybody else. It's just that, it's a call to action, because the large brands are definitely behind the curve in terms of where the other guys are, and that's not meant to criticize them, but more, guys, you can do this. You can fight and capture more share, and not just let it happen all over again like it did the first time the internet came along and everybody was sort of caught flat-footed and watched booking share leak away.
See, here's the thing. We've evaluated every single hotel chatbot, right? You can buy the most sophisticated hotel chatbot today for less than $5,000. So there's nobody. If you haven't got that kind of budget, you're probably, not really realistically in the industry.
Yeah.
Particularly when the ROI is in the hundreds of percent.
For sure. It's just that if you're part of a broader tech ecosystem that's dictated by the brand, it might be tough to just sort of plug that in, right? If you're like wanting it to be represented on brand.com, that might be tough. Unless the brand is right there with you with all the backing to say, yep, we've got it, just plug it in.
There's going to be a lot more conflict between the hotel owners and the brands over this whole area, but that's another whole story.
I believe you. There's another gentleman back here, and I realize you probably want me to get off the stage here and move on. Right over here is a gentleman wearing a tie.
Hi, Mike Grant from Dramatics. A question that's come across my mind the whole time coming into this is, who and how does someone put their thumb on the scale? Whether it be commercialized, where my name comes up first every time, or somebody nefariously finds a way to, if you look and you look and you look, no one's going to see a pattern. But over time, if flag A shows up as the dominant, always choice.
Yeah, I think I do. Well, and really, if you think about it, there was a time where we all weren't sure how Google was going to prioritize their search results, right? And and then over time, folks became a little bit more aware of quote unquote the algorithm, right? The search algorithm and how it preferenced different results. And some people got very scientific and clever about it. Booking.com was famously able to command much more direct and organic search because they had reverse engineered a lot of what happened with the algorithm, and they did clever things like position ghost servers in countries that were close to the content, the content target, if you will. So if you're searching for, places to go in Croatia, Booking.com would put a server in Croatia and get it indexed by Google and get biased upwards in the screen in the results screens by doing that, and then they would actually serve the content back out of a major server someplace else, not the ghost server that got indexed. So they were super clever in how they did that. And I think the level of cleverness to figure out how to put your thumb on the scale for generative AI is going to be even greater. And I don't know what it is because I think the actual behavior of these generative AI tools is something of an emergent phenomenon that people haven't exactly algorithmically designed. It's kind of a thing that just comes out of the neural network, right? And I think it'll take some cleverness to figure out how to bias, how to put your own thumb on that scale. Okay, well, one more? Okay. Okay, I'm okay with that. But thank you very much. Appreciate your time.